those baseless claims of voter fraud. And now here we have the Senate Majority Leader saying that they are baseless, saying that the voters have spoken, the states have spoken, and that the courts have spoken as well, and really laying out where we are right now in stark terms. I think you asked the right question. What happens next? What is the fallout within the GOP? I can tell you that a number of top Republicans are pointing the finger squarely at President Trump for the stunning upset that we saw overnight in Georgia, the fact that another race might go to the Democrats, and that the Democrats will likely have control of the Senate. They say that is on President Trump's shoulders. So what happens next? We are going to witness a party that's going to wrestle with these deep divides, Lester.
Yeah, and we are seeing that protests continue to play out on the streets of Washington. Supporters of the president who believe what he is saying about his chances to hold on to the presidency. Ellison Barber is with some of those protesters on the ground in Washington. I'm curious, Ellison, how much this crowd knows about some of the events of the last hour or so.
Lester, I just want to show you what's happening right now. It looks like to us the protesters have been able to take the bicycle barricades down here, and they're making their way up the steps of the U.S. Capitol right now. When this happened a minute ago, it's not entirely clear how or why they've been able to get past this area, but all morning there have been bicycle racks keeping protesters back. At some point, it seems those became open somehow. Either the protesters here pushed through it or someone moved them back. They are now making their way up the steps of the U.S. Capitol. You can see Capitol Police there holding the crowds back. People started cheering, saying, "Let's go, let's go." I spoke to one person earlier asking if they had seen the letter that the vice president sent over. When I showed it to them, they were shocked. They said if that was from Pence, they didn't quite believe me when I read it to them, that they were disappointed. But right now it seems like we have seen the protesters who have been here all morning actually breach the bicycle barricades. You can see what they look like. It's these right here, and make their way up to the steps of the U.S. Capitol here. And for now, it seems like police are holding them back to some degree. But this is the furthest we have ever seen any protesters make their way up towards anything. And when they started moving, there were loud cheers from the crowd here. And for now, it seems like police have them stopped on the steps there, but they have broken through the bicycle barricades, the bicycle racks that were here, and have made their way up the steps of the United States Capitol. Lester?
Yeah, I can't recall, and maybe it's happened, but I certainly can't recall protests that have reached that far up to the Capitol, to the steps. But again, as you point out, it appears Capitol Police have it under control. We'll continue to check back with you, Ellison. I want to bring in Michael Beschloss, the NBC News presidential historian, for a moment. Michael, as we were talking a moment ago, the president is losing many of his key supporters, even his apparently we lost Michael Beschloss. I apologize. Let me bring back Kristen Welker. Kristen, following up on the point we were talking about, it was several months ago the issue was raised of, would the president leave peacefully? Will there be a peaceful handover of power? And that question seems it has to loom large again as we watch these objections take place in the Capitol, key allies, the president now turning against him, people marching on the streets up to the foot of the Capitol. It's hard not to take a step back and wonder where we are.
Well, there's no doubt that the president's baseless accusations of widespread fraud have risked a peaceful transfer of power. And as you point out, Lester, these scenes that are unfolding in the streets of D.C., these protesters who are trying to break into the Capitol, it's really just extraordinary footage. There is a big question mark about what the president's exit will look like. We have been talking to officials here behind the scenes, and even they don't know the answer to that, Lester. We know that there was some discussion about him potentially announcing a run in 2024 on the day of President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration. I am being told that there are mounting calls from some of his closest advisors for him to wait, for him to hold off. In part, they say, because he would create an unnecessary split screen. He wouldn't have the momentum that he would want to have heading into a new election cycle, and to potentially even wait until until after the next midterm elections in 2022. So those question marks, though, really adding to the unease and concerns about whether there will be a peaceful transfer of power. And look, in speaking to Biden transition officials, they say that the Trump administration has not been as forthcoming as they would like with information as they embark upon this historic transition in which they are going to be taking over the COVID pandemic, the economy in crisis. And so those are really underscoring the key concerns about how this transition will be carried out as the president continues these baseless claims and continues to spin up and energize his supporters in this way. Lester.
All right, Kristen, thanks. Let me bring in Pete Williams, our justice correspondent. Pete, so these objections could take this process late into the night. As you noted, the conclusion is a foregone one that Joe Biden will take the oath of office on the 20th. Is there anything between now and the 20th that they could use to try and continue to derail things?
No, I think the simple answer to that is no. There are still some lawsuits out there pending, believe it or not, but it's just too late. It's too late to challenge the process. It was really very late after the electoral vote in December. Once the Congress certifies the vote, or counts the vote, it's really game over. Now, you were talking about the future. There are a lot of questions about how this election was conducted in the midst of a pandemic that undoubtedly are going to lead to discussions in states all around the country about how possibly to change procedures. How to distribute mail-in ballots, what kind of documentation has to come with them. Can state officials make changes like that without permission from the state legislature? All of that. At the same time, I know from talking to election scholars that there's going to be a real interest in trying to get Congress to change the law. To change the law that we've looked through this whole process about how you count electoral votes. So I think there'll be real momentum for that. And one other thing I would say, Lester, is, as we try to figure out, well, it looks now like the Capitol, the police are
Pete, let me break away from you a second. Because things are happening very quickly there on the appears to be the east side of the Capitol. People now have moved past the police and into the building. Ellis and Barbara, what can you tell us?
Hey, Lester, yeah, you can see what's happening right in front of us. We saw Capitol Police trying to push people back, hold them back, and arrest them. They did seem to be arresting some, but they no longer have been able to keep them back. You can see some Capitol Police officers and protesters up there waving for more. If you look just right next to me, there is a massive amount of what appears to be blood on the ground here. At least one person over here is being injured and taken away on a stretcher right now. As more and more people make their way towards the step and push through. As I was watching this, saying it looks like people are being arrested, one woman came up to me and she said that this is what happens when they believe that there have been what they believe are fraud in the election, and told me these are people standing up for America. But you can see a lot of people packed on the steps now. They have pushed back the barricade, the physical barricade that was initially down here, the bicycle racks, then the barricade of Capitol Police officers standing on the steps, holding them back, and they have made their way all the way up the U.S. Capitol steps. We have seen people be detained, seemingly arrested, put in handcuffs, and we have seen at least one person who appears to have fairly serious injuries enough to be taken away, and blood left here on the ground where people have pushed past this barricade. You can hear them getting louder cheering as more people make their way to this area. Some sort of loud explosion type bang noise right now as some people are starting to move. It's hard to see what is happening beyond what's right in this area, but Capitol Police have gone to the other steps to try to keep those secure, but it seems like they've lost the majority of the control of these steps down here in the middle as more and more protesters make their way towards this area. They are coming from both sides of the Capitol at this point, filling in this area here. Lester?
Yeah, this is a disturbing scene, to say the least. It appeared that police essentially retreated and closed the doors,
Grammarly can help you rate quickly and confidently, so you never have to slow down at work.
Entering the building. This
Instant corrections make your writing mistake-free.
In Washington, the president's supporters, the president addressed those supporters a couple of hours ago. and continued to claim many of the bogus claims that he's made about the legitimacy of the election. But clearly, these are folks who believe him and who are now taking the extraordinary step of now setting siege to at least part of the Capitol. Casey Hunt, you were, if I believe, right across the street from this in one of the Senate office buildings. We know some of the office buildings were evacuated. Is this all related?
It seems so, Lester. We're still trying to determine exactly what the cause was to have people actually relocate from the Cannon complex. I think evacuation may be the wrong word to explain what we now know happened in the Cannon office building. They've gathered staff inside the complex. The calculation seems to be that it is safer to remain inside the complex than to send people out into what everyone is looking at right now on the screen. But again, we have not gotten any reports or indications of anything inside one of the buildings that at this point would cause us to be alarmed about that. So we're going to continue to keep an eye on this. Now, this scene that we're watching here, so this is the the east front of the Capitol. That door, some of the viewers may recognize if you've ever watched a state funeral, when John McCain's casket or George H.W. Bush's casket recently came, was at the U.S. Capitol building. It comes out that door. It's carried down those steps. It's an extraordinarily, it's a ceremonial door. So far as we can see, there's no indication that it has been breached. And I would say that it would be an unbelievably significant thing for something like that to happen. So I want to set that aside for a second because just the scene of all these people here is also remarkable. This is an area that is always controlled by the Capitol Police. In fact, in recent months, it's been hard to, if you're a member of a general public, even walk along the driveway that's in front of the Capitol steps. You have to have a Capitol ID. I mean, this is where, I've walked to work through one of the doors on the side of this building every day for the last 10 or 15 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Again, it's an area that, members of Congress will pull up in their cars to go in and out of the buildings on the Senate and the House side. These steps are right in the middle of the building, so that's the dome, the rotunda. It's the middle of the Capitol. On one side is the Senate chamber, the other side, the House of Representatives. Of course, our entire government now gathered here in this building, the Senate debating on one side, the House debating on the other, to try and deal with these objections to the counting of the Electoral College. And I think it's important to underscore, Lester, that the President of the United States has encouraged people to do this. They are here at his urging. He held a rally at the Ellipse just down the street. And there are, of course, members, Republican members of the House and the Senate, who are saying that this election should be overturned, that there should be and are doubts about the validity of it. And that is part of why, largely why, all of these people have come to Washington and are engaged in a spectacle that I don't think we've seen in modern times, and certainly one that is nerve-wracking for those who typically find security inside this building. So a truly remarkable split-screen moment, Lester.
I certainly feel the loss of words to describe what we're seeing and how this will resonate. I want to note that Kevin McCarthy, House GOP leader, has asked for protesters to remain peaceful, writing on Twitter, "Thank you to Capitol Police for protecting the people's house. Protesters have a constitutionally protected right to be heard, but I urge them to remain peaceful." And we should note the crowd has, again, essentially forced the police officers there on the east front of the Capitol inside, as people now have taken a position to wave the flags and continue the rally. I want to bring Pete Williams back in. Pete, we know the mayor in Washington, D.C. had activated the National Guard in the event of any violence. This is federal property here. This is the Capitol. Would they have any role, any possible role in if things were to get out of hand here?
Oh, sure. There's U.S. Capitol Police have the ultimate jurisdiction on the Capitol grounds, but they could call in that help as well. Those doors on the east front of the Capitol, known as the Columbus doors, are bronze doors. They're immensely huge, heavy doors. So once they close the doors, there's no way anybody's going to get into the building. But having them on the steps there is certainly not what the police had in mind. We understood earlier that a portion of the Library of Congress, which is if you were standing up there where all those people are, you looked out toward where we are, toward the camera, and across the street, you'd be looking at the Library of Congress. We believe part of that has been evacuated now. It wasn't open to the public anyway, but staffers inside were asked to leave, and also parts of the House Office building, which would be to your left across Independence Avenue if you were standing there in the plaza. And we have been told by a couple of law enforcement officials that it was a suspicious package. Now, you know, suspicious packages, frankly, we see those almost every week here in Washington, but obviously under the current circumstances, there's a little more concern because of it. But I think it's fair to say that the protesters are not going to be able to get inside the Capitol building.
And we do know that there are underground passageways for members of Congress to safely make their way out of the Capitol, even as this is going on. Ellison Barber is on the scene there outside the east front of the Capitol. Ellison, is this crowd being fed? We know people are leaving the rally. Are there people, is this growing, I guess is my question.
Hey, Lester. Yeah, sorry, we're kind of making our way a little as safely as we can closer to try and get the best vantage point and see as much as we can. To answer your question, yes, particularly coming over from this side here, you can see it's slowed a little bit, but people are still coming to this area. Initially, right after they broke through the barricades and made their way up towards the stairs, it seemed like anybody that was kind of near the area. We've seen a lot of different small groups of protesters around the Capitol all morning. It seemed like anybody who was nearby made their way here as quickly as they could. I mean, people hurrying along the sides here. More people are still coming and making their way towards this area, though in some ways, and this has really only been in the last 15 minutes or so, it does feel a little bit calmer here than it did initially when those barricades first went down and as they inched their way up the stairs. The people who are here, they've kind of stayed put, but we are seeing a slow trickle of other people still coming in here. Chants, we've heard chants of USA, USA. For now, it seems like there might be some sort of, I don't know if controlled chaos is the right word, but it's the only one I can think of at this moment, where you have a little bit less people sprinting in. Capitol Police seem to have fairly good control of the other side steps and haven't let people up those. But this area, this group here, most of them have been here all morning. The group has grown throughout the day. We've seen after they breached the barricade, more people coming towards this area. And it seems like, Lester, they have no plans of leaving anytime soon.
All right, Ellison, keep us posted. And let me go back to Casey Hunt. As we watch the Senate and House now continue to debate the Republican objections to the results in Arizona, the first of what we believe will be several states that will be challenged in a process that will certainly be elongated because of these Republican challenges. Casey, are the senators and House members aware of what's going on outside the building?
So yes, it's hard not to be, and you're seeing both chambers. Our viewers can see on the sides of the screens the dais for each, and you just saw some men in suits running